Mental skills training plans are systematic plans designed to help athletes build mental skills into their games by helping them develop, maintain, and regain a flow mindset. We will cover the following mental skills and how to train them in your practices. Motivation is reflected in 3 behaviors: choice, effort, and persistence. With choice, motivation shows in the choices athletes make, such as choosing to play, practice, train, and setting challenging goals. How intensely athletes train, compete, and strive to achieve their goals depends on effort. Persistence is how long the athletes persist at striving to attain their goals, even in the face of adversity or obstacles. Athletes are not born with motivation or without. Coaches cannot give athletes motivation, and motivation is not all about reward and punishment, despite what many believe. The goal is to have athletes who are intrinsically motivated. This means athletes are motivated by the sheer pleasure of the game and the inner satisfaction athletes experience from participating in sports. Essentially, these athletes play for the love of the game. Athletes want to demonstrate competence and avoid demonstrating lack of competence. Here, they adopt either a mastery or an outcome orientation. Mastery-oriented athletes define success based on personal standards such as effort, improvement, personal development, and task mastery. Even if they lose, if they perform well, they feel good. Outcome-oriented athletes are failure avoiders and doubt their abilities. They are armed with excuses based on winning versus losing, and they also appear not to even care, even though they do. These athletes often believe success was an accident or do not take credit for their success, but they do internalize any poor performance. They have a lower self-worth because they believe they have a lack of talent. To create a mastery-oriented team atmosphere, set mastery-related goals. Alter feedback to avoid outcome-related feedback. Develop constructive outlook on both success and failure. Teach your athletes that failure does not mean a lack of ability or talent, but rather an insufficient effort, preparation, or skill development. This will help your athletes motivate themselves to try it harder in practice next time. The target team client structure is a great tool to use each practice to make sure you are falling in line with a mastery-oriented team atmosphere. T stands for task structure. Design practice activities that emphasize self-improvement and learning that are challenging and fun. A stands for the authority structure. Create opportunities for independence and responsibility as well as self-direction. R stands for reward structure. Recognize athletes' learning, effort, and improvement ahead of winning. All athletes receive positive recognition for playing well even after a loss. G stands for grouping structure. Use a variety in grouping athletes to expand learning opportunities. Clearly define their roles to foster role acceptance. E stands for evaluation structure. Ensure that evaluation is based on concrete performance criteria, including individual skill development, progress, improvement, and mastery. Encourage athletes to self-evaluate. Mistakes are natural, especially if they are made while trying hard. The second T stands for time structure. Adjust time allotments based on athletes' ability and on the task difficulty so that each player has adequate time to learn skills fully. Also emphasize skill improvement and learning in each practice throughout season. This scale demonstrates how athletes need to be challenged in a way that is compatible with their skills to enjoy the sport. If skills greater than challenge, they become bored. If their skills are less than the challenge, they become anxious. This is very hard to coach at the youth level because many young athletes are at different levels. There are some ways to bridge the difference and keep athletes motivated. Fun and stimulation is one way. By keeping practices fun, stimulating, and challenging, athletes are excited and motivated. To make practice more fun, you can use developmental progressions to create better skill challenge balance. You can also keep practice stimulating by varying activities. Teach fundamentals by means of action-packed games and activities that use the targeted skills. Keep everyone active and don't create activities with long lines so players do not get bored. Set aside time in practice where athletes can play a game without receiving evaluation or feedback from a coach. The next way to achieve this is by understanding an athlete's need for acceptance and belonging. Athletes desire to fit in and thus respond well to team goals because they desire to be in a group. Team bonding is so huge in and out of practice. Allowing athletes to get to know each other outside the court results in building team cohesion and helping athletes work toward a common goal. Encouraging athletes at practice to play with each other and not against each other is very important. While healthy competition can be used, athletes should not feel pinned against one another. Use your returning players as mentors to the new athletes. Finally, as a coach, make sure you are making athletes feel important. Defining their roles to each and every athlete and valuing each role, from the leading scorer to a bench player, with a great attitude. Athletes desire to have control and autonomy. They want to have control of their own lives and determine the own courses of their behavior even at a young age. If you, as a coach, can help them develop personal responsibility, you'll be saving yourself a lot of time and doing a great job preparing them for the outside world. Provide rationale for your decisions to the players. Remind them why we are doing each drill. Ensure that athletes feel they are responsible for their own fate and are not just pawns on the team. Solicit athletes' input and provide choices. Involve athletes in developing of practice plans and game strategies. While athletes want to have control, they also want to feel competent and successful. Perceived competence means having positive perceptions of one's skills and abilities and feeling capable of succeeding in sport. This works closely with involving athletes in practice planning because it shows them you trust their input and will help them to feel more confidence. Rewards are extrinsic motivators and they can turn work into play. However, they can undermine intrinsic motivation if they are used in the wrong way. These guidelines can help teach you how to reward properly. Rewards should be based on meaningful accomplishments and raise perceived confidence. Use rewards to acknowledge effort, improvement, or performance regardless of winning or losing. Transform extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation over time by gaining interest with rewards and slowly helping athletes find the love of the game and not the reward. Keep in mind that these rewards do not have to be big. They can be small, especially because small rewards are viewed as less controlling to athletes. Energy management has to do with helping your athletes control their arousal, or the energy that fuels their performance. Athletes get energy from arousal, the general physiological activation of the body that varies on a continuum from deep sleep to intense excitement. Try to raise arousal by psyching the kids up. Arousal is when you are faced with a stressful competitive situation. The cortex of the brain is stimulated, triggering the activation of the automatic nervous system, which controls most of the body's automated systems. The ANS pumps adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol into the bloodstream, and those hormones spur physiological changes that prepare the body for action. Heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing increase, and muscles begin to develop tension and anticipation for the work to come. Decreased blood flow to the digestive system prompts athletes to experience butterflies in their stomachs, while reduced blood flow to the extremities can leave hands and feet feeling like ice cubes. Arousal is triggered in response to any real or perceived demand, whether physical or mental. This activation process, often termed the fight or flight syndrome, originated as the body's way of dealing with real or imaginable physical danger by readying itself to fight or run. Arousal affects performance in 3 ways. The first way is as arousal increases from low to moderate levels, performance improves, eventually reaching a zone where athletes perform their best. But any increases in arousal beyond this optimal zone will reduce performance quality. This is called the inverted U hypothesis. Under arousal is bad because the cardiovascular system has not pumped oxygen into the muscles. The mental functions haven't been sharpened, so attention, motivation, and processing are all low and difficult. Over-arousal is bad because there are excessive muscular tension and coordination problems. Attentional problems such as attentional narrowing too far and attentional styles they cannot jump from to analyze properly. Processing is hindered. They learn to use controlled processing and automatic processing, but when over-aroused, they begin to overthink and not just play. The left side of the inverted U is where arousal is too low and is termed the psych-up zone because athletes need to raise their arousal in order to perform. The right side is where top of performance is hindered because there is excessive arousal. This is called the psych-out zone because athletes need to lower their arousal levels. In the middle is ideal, or the optimal energy zone range, where athletes are more likely to experience flow and perform their best. The optimal energy zone for each athlete is unique. Athletes' optimal energy zones are influenced by various factors related to personality and athletic ability. On a 9-point scale, 4 and 6 are good, while 5 is the best. Athletes perceive arousal as facilitative when their mental anxiety is low. Their self-confidence is high and they are focused on the process or performance rather than the outcome. Debilitative arousal conditions occur when the mental anxiety is high, self-confidence is low, and athletes are focused on product or outcome instead of process. Falling between these two extremes, neutral arousal conditions include moderate mental anxiety, moderate self-confidence, and some combination of focus on process and product. When athletes experience facilitative arousal conditions, their performance should be at its height. Relationship between arousal and anxiety is close. Physical anxiety refers to physiological changes such as muscular tension, butterflies, shortness of breath, sweating, dry mouth, frequent urination, and increased heart rate. Mental anxiety either expect to fail or worry about negative consequences of failure. Both impair performance. Reversals in the heat of competition. Athletes may shift their focus to outcome and become anxious and choke. When athletes interpret high levels of arousal as excitement, they perform optimally. But when they interpret high arousal as anxiety, they perform poorly. This 3-step process to allow for reversal helps. First, arousal must be lowered because it is very hard to change the perspective when arousal is elevated. Athletes must reverse their motivational style to be process-oriented so they can interpret their arousal positively. They must gradually re-evaluate their arousal, taking pains to view heightened arousal as excitement and readiness. Catastrophes occur when athletes performed well before hitting a certain arousal level, then suffered a catastrophic drop in performance. They use energization skills to raise arousal back to the optimal energy zone while keeping thoughts about arousal and competition as positive, rational, and construction as possible. The optimal energy zone for each athlete is unique. Athletes' optimal energy zones are influenced by various factors related to their personality and athletic ability. It is impossible to tell athletes exactly which zone is ideal for any particular sport or task, and your athlete's optimal energy zone may change for these 3 categories: fine versus gross motor skills, short versus long duration tasks, and simple versus complex tasks. As we saw in the last diagram, simple tasks require higher arousal and more complex tasks require low arousal. Basketball is a sport that generally falls right in the middle, with medium arousal being necessary for high performance. Attention is the process that directs our awareness to information available through our senses. The goal of sport attention is to just go out and focus on the task at hand and block out all distractions. But that is difficult to do because we are continually receiving information through our senses about external and internal environments. Selective attention is the process we use to attend to some information, ignore, or screen out the rest. To help athletes develop these skills and teach them to become aware of the cues they need to attend to in order to perform well, blocking out distraction, use these skills. Develop a mindset, help athletes learn what cues are important, use video training. Show athletes video depicting typical scenarios in sport. Have them watch for cues, then pause at times to see what they would do. Draw attention to important cues. Pause practice to emphasize cues. Use performance-related cue words. Many athletes find it useful to develop task-relevant, performance-related cue words to help them focus on the right information. Create a catchphrase, like "keep your eye on the ball." to remind him or her to keep their eye on the ball all the way into their hands. Use focus plans. Athletes can run through it and not have to think about where to focus their attention. Use like a checklist, preparing for any distractors. Any intense or unexpected stimuli is especially likely to grab attention, like a loud noise. The natural tendency to attend to this type of stimulus is called the orienting response. Provide stimulations and encourage the use of imagery. Imagine responding to potential distractions. Concentration is the ability to block out these distractions and sustain focus. The challenge is that the key words athletes need to focus on are constantly changing. Attentional dimensions can be viewed along two dimensions, broad or narrow, and directions, internal or external. Attentional width is how many stimuli or cues athletes need to attend to at any given moment. For example, the broad attentional focus needed for a point guard attacking the court in transition and attentional direction is whether the athlete is focused inward on thoughts and feelings or outwards on events happening around them, like internal focus for the game planning strategy versus external for the need to execute sport skill. There are, however, limits to attention. Attentional overload is when attentional demand exceeds athletes' ability to handle information. This hurts performance. As long as the task requirements do not exceed the athlete's attentional capability, they can perform several tasks at once. An example of this is the youth basketball players who are new to basketball will need to focus all of their attention to dribbling, unable to focus on anything else. However, once they learn how to handle the ball, they are more able to dribble with their head up, either hand, crossover, see the floor, read a defense, etc. After lots of practice, athletes can do basic skills without thinking about it. They just perform. They shift to an automatic processing, also known as automaticity. Here are some coaching tips. Youth players are easily overloaded. If the drills are above their skill level, it may seem like they aren't focused or they aren't paying attention. To prevent these attentional overloads in your athletes, you can simplify skills when athletes first learn them, simplify strategy and decision-making requirements, ensure that athletes overlearn and automate fundamental skills. You can use videos to help athletes learn to choose appropriate responses quickly with minimal conscious thought in the heat of competition. Pause the video at a critical moment and have them talk it through before continuing the video. Skilled players can use anticipation skills to read what is happening and make the perfect move at the perfect time because they are very skilled at using clues. Sustaining focus and concentration require practice just like learning to dribble. It also takes a lot of energy. This involves quieting the mind and becoming absorbed in the activity. This is prevented by excessive thinking, lack of trust in self, and fatigue. To deal with the above, use quieting drills, triggers, releases, directing attention away from distracting thoughts and feelings, and being in control. Having a refocus plan. Self-talk skills can be used for quieting drills. Triggers are words or actions that remind athletes to concentrate. Some simply stay focused. Releases can let go negative thoughts and feelings that prevent them from concentrating on the present. Athletes can use breathing control and rapid relaxation to divert concentration from distracting thoughts. Recognizing they are being distracted and being able to refocus is rare. Stress happens when one incorrectly assumes that certain situations are inherently stressful because their excessive competitive demands result in extra pressure to result well. Stress is the substantial imbalance between what we believe is demanded of us, or the competitive demand, and what we perceive as our capabilities to be for meeting those demands or personal control, for situations in which success is important. Emotional management can be proactive or reactive emotional management. The total emotion management practices have a systematic approach, automating component skills, and developing an integrated coping response. Problem management can be competitive or personal engineering. Competitive engineering reduces unnecessary uncertainty and removes excessive importance. Personal engineering increases personal control and enhances performance capabilities. These both develop problem-solving skills and should be added to mental plans for coaches and athletes. This is Richard Lazar's model of stress. It focuses on competitive demand, personal control, coping strategies, effects on performance, and personality and situational forces. Here is a great tool to help athletes become aware of what stresses them out and what to do when they feel stress coming on. Use this and these common stress symptoms to help educate your athletes. Self-confidence is an athlete's realistic belief or expectation about success. Self-confidence is an accumulation of one's unique achievements across many different tasks and situations, coupled with preparation for the upcoming event, which enables one to develop specific expectations for achieving future success. When self-confidence is high, mental anxiety is low, and vice versa. Optimally confident athletes experience fewer self-doubts and worries than other athletes. They are more likely to interpret high arousal positively as readiness or excitement. Optimally confident athletes have a strong intrinsic motivation to develop their game and continue to succeed. Diffident athletes do not feel competent enough to optimally motivated, and they're often overconfident athletes that feel they are so talented that they do not need to work on their skills. Optimally confident athletes likely have optimal concentration, and their confidence enables them to block out most distractions and help them focus on attentional cues necessary to play their best. This allows them to execute more automatically, which leads to flow. Optimal is the ideal self-confidence level. Too little is referred to as diffidence, and too much is referred to as overconfidence. Optimally confident athletes are competent and prepared. They have the necessary physical and mental skills to achieve the goals. They develop competence by being well-conditioned, mastering their sports fundamentals, developing and executing effective strategies to maximize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses, and excelling at the mental skills necessary to create and maintain a flow mindset. Optimally confident athletes play within themselves. They feel success when they perform well, but they don't worry about achieving goals that are not realistic. They are harder workers in practice. Effort, skill, and strategy development are two types of preparation that are particularly important sources of confidence. They gain confidence knowing no opponent can outwork them. Diffident athletes can have the potential to be great performers, but a mistake or loss does not shatter some athletes, but these athletes fear failure so much that they see themselves as losers because they blame themselves. Poor performance confirms their negative self-image. A person who doubts himself is like a man who would enlist in the ranks to his enemies and bear arms against himself. He makes his failure certain by himself being the first person to be convinced of it. Alexandre Dumas. These athletes thrive off of performance goals. These athletes need to build a history of performance-related accomplishments. 3 aspects of performance accomplishments that affect the development of confidence are consistency, recency, and quality of success. By setting up a Hall of Fame or highlight video for these athletes, they are able to see these performance accomplishments and believe it more. It is important to develop arousal control, team confidence, and self-confidence. Coaches should develop expectations for athletes should perform. Coaches' expectations influence their treatment of individual performers. Coaches' behaviors affect athletes' rate of learning and level of performance. The cycle is completed when athletes' behavior of performance conforms to coaches' expectations. These questions will determine if self-fulfilling prophecy may be alive and well on your team.